Octavian had been waiting for exactly this moment. He went to Rome and read out Antony's will, which he had obtained, possibly by force, from the Vestal Virgins, where it had been deposited for safekeeping. The will revealed that Antony wanted to be buried in Alexandria beside Cleopatra, that he was giving Roman territories to their children, that he had, in the most fundamental sense, chosen Egypt over Rome. Octavian did not declare war on Antony. That would have been a civil war, Roman against Roman, which carried a terrible political stigma. Instead, he declared war on Cleopatra, the foreign queen who had seduced Rome's greatest general, the Eastern temptress who had corrupted a Roman hero. It was a masterpiece of propaganda that Octavian had been preparing for years. The Senate voted for war. The final confrontation was coming, and both sides knew it. The decisive battle came at Actium, on the western coast of Greece, on September 2nd, 31 BC. Antony and Cleopatra had assembled a combined force of 500 ships and 100,000 soldiers. Octavian had roughly equal forces commanded by his brilliant general Agrippa. The battle was fought at sea, and what happened remains one of the most debated events in ancient history. Partway through the battle, Cleopatra's Egyptian fleet, 60 ships, positioned at the rear, broke off and sailed south, through the battle, away from it, toward Egypt. The ancient sources cannot fully agree on why. Was it a prearranged tactical withdrawal, a moment of panic, a decision to preserve the Egyptian treasury which was aboard those ships so that a last stand could be made in Egypt? We don't know. What we know is what Antony did next. He saw Cleopatra's fleet leaving, and he followed her. He abandoned his fleet. He abandoned his army. He abandoned the battle. He transferred himself to a small, fast ship and chased the purple sails of the woman he loved across the sea, while behind him his fleet surrendered, and his army, leaderless, bewildered, eventually surrendered too. It was the end. They both knew it. Octavian would come to Egypt now. It was only a matter of time. They spent the winter of 31 to 30 BC in Alexandria. They dissolved the Society of the Inimitable Livers and formed a new one. They called it the Society of Those Who Will Die Together. They feasted, they prepared. They sent Caesarion away to safety in the east. Cleopatra began building her mausoleum, a great tomb where she intended to place the treasures of Egypt and herself. Octavian arrived in the summer of 30 BC. His army came from the west. His fleet came from the east. Egypt had nothing left to fight with. Antony's remaining soldiers defected. The fleet surrendered. Alexandria fell almost without resistance. In the final days, Antony received word that Cleopatra was dead, that she had killed herself in her mausoleum. The message was false, possibly sent deliberately, possibly a misunderstanding. But Antony believed it. He asked his servant Eros to run him through with his sword. Eros killed himself instead rather than kill his master. Antony then fell on his own sword. The wound was mortal but not immediately fatal. He was carried, dying, to Cleopatra's mausoleum, where she was very much alive. She refused to open the doors, afraid that Octavian's soldiers would force their way in if she did. But she had her servants lower ropes from an upper window and haul him up. Ancient sources describe the scene in terms that have haunted writers for 2,000 years. Cleopatra pulling at the ropes herself, her hands slipping, the strain visible on her face. Soldiers below watching as the dying general was dragged up the side of the building. He died in her arms inside the mausoleum. The greatest Roman general of his generation, a man who had fought across 3 continents, loved 2 of the most remarkable women of the ancient world, and thrown it all away for one of them, died inside an Egyptian tomb while his conqueror was still marching. Octavian met Cleopatra in Alexandria. Ancient sources describe a remarkable meeting, the cold, calculating young man who had never lost a political battle in his life, facing the last Ptolemaic queen of Egypt. She was 39 years old. She was a widow twice over. Her kingdom was gone, but she had not given up. She still had something to negotiate with, the treasure of Egypt, which she controlled and which Octavian desperately needed to pay his soldiers and consolidate his victory. She played for time. She played for her life, for Caesarion's life, for some kind of future. Octavian was too smart for her. He gave her enough reassurance to prevent her from destroying the treasure. And then he made clear that he intended to take her to Rome, alive, to be paraded through the streets in his triumph. The ultimate Roman victory celebration, the conquered queen of Egypt in chains, displayed to the Roman people as proof of his greatness. Cleopatra had watched what happened to her sister Arsinoe, who had been paraded through Rome in Caesar's triumph years before. She had seen the humiliation, the crowds, the chains. She was not going to Rome in chains. She was not going to be the centerpiece of Octavian's triumph. She was not going to let the last queen of Egypt be displayed like a trophy. On August 12, 30 BC, the ancient sources are not entirely certain of the method, whether it was a snake, a needle dipped in poison, or something else entirely. Cleopatra died. She was 39 years old. She was dressed in her royal robes, her crown on her head, lying on her golden bed as though she had simply chosen to stop. Her 2 handmaidens died with her. Octavian, finding her dead, was furious and apparently moved. He gave her a royal burial beside Antony in Alexandria, as she had wished. Then he had Caesarion, 17 years old, Caesar's biological son, the last threat to his legitimacy, hunted down and executed. He reportedly said of the young man who was both Caesar's son and the last of the Ptolemies, "2 Caesars are too many." Egypt became a Roman province. The 300-year Ptolemaic dynasty was over. The ancient world that Cleopatra had embodied, Greek learning, Egyptian mysticism, a Mediterranean civilization that blended cultures rather than conquering them, was over. The Roman Empire had arrived, and the last queen of Egypt had chosen death over submission. Here is what they reduced her to in the centuries that followed: a seductress, a temptress, a woman who destroyed great men with her beauty. Shakespeare wrote her as tragic but complicit in her own downfall. Hollywood dressed her in elaborate costumes and gave her famous faces and romantic music. They turned the most politically sophisticated ruler of the ancient world into a love story. She was not primarily a love story. She was a politician of extraordinary genius who used every tool available to her, including her relationships with the most powerful men of her era, in a decades-long fight to preserve her kingdom, her dynasty, and her people against the overwhelming power of Rome. She came closer to succeeding than any ruler of a smaller power had any right to. She was also, it appears, genuinely capable of love. The ancient sources suggest her feeling for Antony was real in a way that her relationship with Caesar, however significant, never quite was. She failed, but the manner of her failure, choosing death on her own terms over the humiliation of Roman captivity, was in its way a final act of sovereignty. They could conquer her kingdom. They could kill her son. They could not make her walk in chains through Rome. That was hers, the last thing that was hers, and she kept it. The story of Cleopatra and Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra, is not really a love story. It is a story about power, about what it costs, about what people are willing to sacrifice for it and to preserve it. It is a story about 2 civilizations, Roman and Egyptian, West and East, colliding in the persons of 3 extraordinary human beings and what was lost when one of them won. The ancient world ended on August 12, 30 BC, in a golden room in Alexandria when a 39-year-old queen chose how she was going to die. And the world has been talking about it ever since. Subscribe, because what they hid from history, we are bringing it back, one truth at a time.